Welcome back to another chapter of the Bible Explained. I wanted to thank you guys for tuning in. So, in the last three chapters, we recapped how man was created, how man was given everything, and then how man failed God's test by eating the one thing that God told him not to. And so, man fell, and that's pretty much the part we're on right now. Man was cast out, kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and here we are on chapter 4, which is aptly dubbed Cain and Abel. So I want to begin by saying that I'm very thankful for everyone's attendance here. Once again, this is more akin to a Bible study, but it's a much more extensive Bible study than what you would see in a normal Sunday school. Sometimes they would go line by line, but again, I try to use my education to better everyone and not just skim over the top, but actually delve into like each individual word. So that's what we're going to be doing here. If you haven't seen or listened to the previous 3 chapters, I would highly recommend it. So with that, let's get into it. Cain and Abel, chapter 4. Adam made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother Abel. So, a couple of things to go off here. It should be noted that man was in the Garden of Eden and man was perfect. Now that man is cast out, man is imperfect and man knows sin, but we missed some middle grounds here. It might be uncomfortable in most churches to bring up the idea of sex in the Bible, but there's a lot of it. And I believe that's a lot to do with the Puritan heritage and how at the times Christianity was being established during the Greco-Roman period, and there was a lot of debauchery that was happening, and Christianity wanted to separate itself from a lot of that, and that's why a lot of the negative sin-filled things of this world, such as sex, is frowned upon in the church. Of course, it should be noted that within the first 4 chapters of the Bible, we're already talking about sex within the first verse of chapter 4 here. And that is to discuss that there were 2 brothers that were descendants of Adam and Eve, which is Abel and Cain. And of course, this is a story that's known by many secular people, but it should also be noted that somehow Adam and Eve knew how to produce children. So again, let's just imagine here, the Bible doesn't speak on this. The Bible doesn't speak on a lot of things. It just skips a lot of the middle ground. But was Adam and Eve informed how they needed to use the restroom? Were they informed that they might die if they didn't eat? Were they informed that they had to urinate if they drank too much? Or was this stuff that they just found out, right? So the question must be asked, how did they learn how to have sex? And that's something that is filled in, but it is a question that's worth asking. A lot of people are curious, like how did God say that they were going to learn this? And he was just like, yep, this is how you do it. Or did they already know it? So just something worth thinking about. We're still on the 2nd verse here, which is later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept the flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some fruits of the soil, as an offering to the Lord, and Abel brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked on with favor towards Abel and his offering, but Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was angry, and his face was downcast. So another thing to note here is that in this verse, a lot of people take this and say, well, Cain did what he did because God favored Abel and he was jealous. And this might be true, but why? Why was God more accepting of the offering? And we're going to get into that shortly. We're going to recap this, but I want to really get into this here. Moving on to verse 6. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." So, that's interesting. God directly spoke to Cain and told him and warned him that he must rule over his sin and face his jealousy. Why would Cain's face be downcast? God is not asking this because he doesn't know. The Lord obviously already knows exactly what's going through Cain's mind, the jealousy, the anger, the bitterness. And there's many mentions in the Bible later on why you should not be jealous or angry and why they are sins for the most part. Emotions are emotions and you can't control them, but the actions are what dictates it. If you note, God is not saying that Cain has sinned yet. Cain has not. God is noting that sin is very close to Cain and could clearly take him. And the Lord knows what will happen, and the Lord chooses to interject here and let Cain know that there's a good chance that he's going to be ruled by sin if he doesn't rule over it himself. And it's interesting because he continuously asks these questions. Why? Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? But Cain would know that God is the ruler of everything, omnipotent, would know the answer to these questions anyways. And so, with this warning, I want to backtrack just a little bit and note that God is stating that if you do what is right, you will be accepted, right? Like, this is what's going to happen. You just do what's right. So God didn't accept Cain's offering as much as Abel's, but a lot of people say it's because Abel offered something better. Abel offered livestock, a live slaughter, right? Some of the fat portions of his firstborn, and God said that was better than the fruits of the soil. Now, a lot of people say that the reason that Cain's offering wasn't accepted was because Cain withheld something. But here you can see in chapter 4, taking it from verse 2 all the way down to verse 5, there is literally nothing that says Cain's offering was lesser than God's. It's only subjective that a living creature was more valuable than fruits grown from the earth, which would make sense, especially the connotation in the notes of fat portions and firstborn. The problem lies that a lot of people say that Cain didn't give his best, but it doesn't say that Cain withheld anything. It doesn't say that Cain did not give his best. It doesn't say that Cain was holding his best out for himself and giving God something that was lesser. Do you understand? That's something that should be noted. That's something that's very important, that God did not chastise Cain and say that your offering is not acceptable. He just looked upon Abel more with favor. He didn't look upon Cain's offering with favor, but he did not cast out Cain. He didn't say, "Cain, you will burn in hell for your terrible offering." Nothing of the sort. Again, which goes into verse 6 and 7, where the Lord warns about sin. So now that we have that all out of the way, we're going to continue on. We're going to verse 9. Then the Lord said unto Cain, excuse me, I apologize. We're going to go on to verse 8. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." While they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. In this verse, you'll note that there is no mention of how Cain killed Abel. Cain could have picked up a rock. Cain could have just beat him to death with his hands, choked him, whatever. It is not mentioned or described explicitly how Cain killed his brother. So again, if somebody says, well, Cain and Abel went to the field and he killed him with a rock because God didn't accept Abel's offering or this, that, and the other, it's just not true. You got to look into the Bible yourself. You got to understand the wording, the specifics. It's very important, even the nuances, even though they don't seem important. If you can figure it out, it might be important to you and your understanding of the faith. So that is his brother. Again, it's emphasized that his brother, because we already know who Cain and Abel is. He was just introduced 8 verses ago. So why do you keep saying brother, brother, brother this, brother that, right? So it's to put importance on the family structure. This is almost as close as you can get to someone. It's your own brother. And so he killed him. And we're moving on to verse 9 now. Then the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? And once again, the Lord already knows. The Lord's omnipotent. So why would God ask? Why would God ask Cain where his brother is? At this point in time, it also should be noted that this is the first human's death on earth. So where did Cain and Abel's spirit go once they were dead? Where would they have gone at this point in time? Certainly, it's not described here. So where was Abel's spirit exactly? And so, I don't know, he replied, am I my brother's keeper? The most infamous saying in the Bible in retort to somebody asking you how someone else is, am I my brother's keeper? You absolutely are. Of course you are your brother's keeper. That's important. You must take care of your family, right? But this is being done in a very satirical sense. This is being done in a condescending way, such as if your father was asking you, hey, where's your brother? You would say, I don't know where my brother is. Am I his father? Am I his boss? I'm not. So you should be able to figure out where he is. You should know. You know what I mean? And so that's what Cain's saying to the Lord right now, again. And then in verse 10, the Lord said, what have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. So once again, God affirming he knew exactly where Cain was. Cain was dead, and unfortunately Abel was dead, and unfortunately it was Cain's fault. The Lord knew that. Verse 11, now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. And I'd like to point out again, if the Lord was asking where Abel went to Cain, Cain slew Abel, but Cain would have had to dig a grave and bury the body. Obviously, he wouldn't leave it out in the open for God to find. But perhaps that is exactly what happened. Perhaps we do not know, because we can't know, but the point is that God knew Abel was in the ground because of the blood that was crying out, the blood that was on the ground. So it most certainly wasn't strangulation, if this is a literal interpretation of what occurred, because there was blood, so maybe he hit him with a rock of some sort. Who knows? We don't even know if they have bronze tools yet, but perhaps they did. So, once again, now you are under a curse and driven from the land, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. Verse 12, when you work the ground, it will no longer yield crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth. Now, at this point in time, again, there are two theories that go about. There were other people on the planet. There were tons of other people. It was just that Adam and Eve were God's chosen people for the Garden of Eden itself. And all these other people are really not mentioned. So, Cain being cast out of this area that was reserved for Adam and Eve so that they could make amends for their sin against God by eating the fruit which held the knowledge of sin, of good and evil. Or the theory is that really it was just Cain and Abel and Adam and Eve. That was it. These were the only people on the planet. And there is no time that is shown here. It doesn't say that after they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, it was 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. It doesn't say anything of that sort. So it could have been 10 years. It could have been 20. It could have been 200. It could have been 500. At this point in time, humans can live, up to 900 plus years. So it could have been from 10 years to 900 years. I'm going to assume that Adam and Eve were old enough to the point where they could slay each other. So I'm not particularly sure how old they were either, because it's not noted here. So you have to take a good educated guess how many years, but it could be anywhere from 1 to 900. Surely maybe it's like 4 or 5 when they were children, but they're quite old enough to know when they are doing wrong. So clearly, somewhere around 7 or 8 years old. And if you take the idea that God created the earth specifically for Adam and Eve only and created all these animals and creatures, that the earth isn't particularly that old at this point in time with humanity's existence on the planet, unless there were other people. And I'll tell you why that's so important that we're going to get into here later on. Just understand that there's the theory that there could be more people on the planet, or it could just be Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. So verse 13, Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is more than I can bear." Verse 14, "Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." So once again, this is a very, very strange thing, and that's why I preface this with what I was saying before. Whoever, who are you talking about, Cain? There is only Adam and Eve, unless you are talking about Adam and Eve's descendants who will grow and find out what happened to their brother who was murdered by Cain, and they will avenge their brother by killing Cain, right? So that's very strange that he would say that, unless there were other humans at this point in time. And so the Lord continues on, verse 15, "But the Lord said to him, Not so, anyone who kills Cain will suffer my vengeance 7 times over." Then the Lord put the mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. Verse 16, "And so Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden." So we have the mark of shame, which is the mark of Cain, which bears the curse that if anyone were to kill him, they would get vengeance 7 times over from the Lord himself. And Cain is now living in a place called the land of Nod, east of Eden. And again, this is why it is so strange that Cain would go out to this location and be by himself for so long, because eventually Cain will get a family. And you have to ask the question, well then, did Adam and Eve's descendants find Cain, and did one of the women marry Cain and decide to be with Cain? Why would they do that? Why wouldn't Adam and Eve just say, "Hey, you probably should know there's this guy out here named Cain, and he killed one of your brothers, so you need to leave him alone and not mess with him." Unless the person was rebellious and they were saying, "Oh, you know what? I don't care about that." It's pretty insane to think about that when you're in the presence of God and knowing all that you know. You have God's presence literally on you, right? So you're there with perfection. And you have to work, but it's all perfect, right? And so it begs the question, why would somebody leave that and go to the land of Nod and make a family with Cain, which is strange, right? That's very strange. So that's something that needs to be held into the context, because this is a big thing. This is really the split where the Gentiles and Jews come from, that all the Gentiles are asserted to be descendants of Cain, who were not God's people, and the Jews were the descendants of Adam and Eve, which were the descendants of God's people. But later on, there's going to be a great flood, so really, I don't even know how that applies, honestly. So there's a lot of convoluted confusion here. Were there other people out in the earth when Cain left for the land of Nod, or were there not, and did the descendants of Adam and Eve find Cain and have a family with him? It's a good question, and I can't give an answer to that. I can only give those 2 theories. Verse 17. "So Cain made love to his wife." Again, this is literally the next verse after Cain was cast out to the land of Nod. Where? When did he marry a woman? What woman? Who? How? Where? When? Why? Right? Like, we're missing years. If they can live up to 900 years old, we don't know how old he was when he was cast out. We don't know how old he is when he took a wife. We don't know how old he was when he started a family. But we do know that at some point in time, Cain made love to his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to someone known as Enoch. Cain was then building a city, and he named it after his son Enoch. Now, again, it should be noted that you can only imagine how much one person can do at a time. Cain was building a city by himself. Did he have no help? Who's this wife? Where did this wife come from? Does Cain have an army? Does Cain have people who are working with him to build the city? Why? For what reason? Why would Cain build a city? Did God explain what a city was? At this point in time, when Cain was cast out prior from the location outside the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, there was no city. There wasn't even in plans for a city, right? So, like, what is this? They probably only had a small shack, a house of some sort. Maybe they dwelled in a cave. So how did Cain understand and know to build a city? And that presents another theory that perhaps because when God cast Cain out, Satan accepted Cain in and took his demons and his demonic knowledge and taught Cain a lot. Taught Cain how to create, how to build a city, and provided Cain the knowledge he needed to do such things. It begs a lot of questions. So Cain is making a city, and he's going to name it after his son Enoch. And so, verse 18, to Enoch was born Irad, and Irad was the father to Mehujael, and Mehujael was the father to Methushael, and Methushael was the father to Lamech. And so we see that we have a massive amount of generations here. And it's just building and building and building and showing you the massive family that Cain is getting from all of these children, from all these descendants. So we're getting some lineage, and it's important to have this lineage to connect back. Again, a lot of people trace Jesus' lineage through the descendants that come, and you'll see it later on in the Bible. And so verse 19, Lamech married 2 women. That's pretty good, getting 2. Love the Bible, man. You shouldn't have more than 1 wife. Just kidding, right there. We're in chapter 4, and you're allowed to have 2 wives. But at the same time, later on, some rules do change, kind of. That's, again, subjective and interpretive, and we'll discuss that later on. But they married 2 women. One was named Ada, and the other one was named Zillah. Where did these women come from? Are they descendants of Cain? Are they descendants of Adam and Eve? Was there commingling? Was there people that existed there before? Was there extra people that just didn't make it into the Garden of Eden? Who knows? Verse 20, Ada gave birth to Jabal, and he was the father to those who live in tents and raise livestock. How did they know how to create tents? How did they know how to raise livestock? We know for a fact that Adam and Eve were given dominion over animals on the planet, and we know that Abel was able to raise livestock, so obviously Cain would be able to pass that knowledge along. But again, who taught them to create tents? Verse 21, his brother's name was Jubal, and he was the father to all who played instruments and pipes. And again, that's very interesting. So who taught Jubal how to play? How did they know to create instruments? If you go to verse 22, Zillah also had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. And again, this is my thoughts and my opinions, that Satan and his demons must have imparted knowledge upon Cain and his lineage to create such things. Because if you were in the presence of God and your only job was to till the ground and plant fruits and harvest the fruits, and God was giving you favor, so you were getting great harvests, and you were raising livestock, why would you need tools? What would you use the tools for? How? Why? How would you even forge tools? Would you just say, hey, God, I would like to create this tool that I have no idea about. I don't know how to make it. I don't even know that it existed, but can I make that? So somebody would have had to impart the knowledge on him to even mine the metal and create the tools. We're talking about bronze and iron. Where did the bronze come from? Where did the iron come from? How did they mine the tools and the stuff to begin with? How did they know to mine? A lot of questions with not many answers. Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah. Verse 23, Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, listen to me. Wives of Lamech, hear my words. I have killed a man for wounding me. a young man for injuring me. If Cain is avenged 7 times, then Lamech 70 times. Which is, again, a little strange. They're talking about curses. They're talking about fighting. Who were they fighting? What man wounded you? Are you saying that you killed Cain? Is that what is happening? Again, it's very difficult to sort through these verses unless you do it piece by piece, word by word, and you're left with a lot more questions. Verse 25, Adam made love to his wife again, and she gave birth to a son and named him Seth, saying, God has granted me another child in place of Abel, since Cain killed him. Verse 26, Seth also had a son and named him Enosh. And at the time, people began to call on the name of the Lord. And so we have, with the last verses here, verse 25, that suddenly we're jumped back to Adam and Eve. So we jump away from Adam and Eve. We have Cain. We're following Cain's life. And then suddenly we jump right back to Adam and Eve. I really wish they had made a notation about that. I really wish they had kept it congruent. I really wish they had just kept the flow normal. I wish they had commingled this instead of separating it, because that would make it flow a lot better. That would make it make a lot more sense. But the point is, we have no concept of time. We have no concept of who is teaching Cain all of this stuff. We don't know who or why or how Cain got these people to follow him. We don't know where Cain's wives came from, because now we're at verse 25, and they're talking about Abel being killed and being replaced with the son named Seth. Now, it would be a little bit strange to say this if you had a bunch of female children. It would be strange to say this if you just suddenly said, oh, my daughters, right? That would be a little bit weird. Why would you say that instead of saying, hey, I had like 10 daughters and they all left to live with Cain, and now I have Seth and he's a good kid and he stays with me, right? So it would be very strange to say that I have the son Seth and I didn't have any other kids whatsoever, just like ignoring the fact that you had several daughters. So I don't think there were several daughters. I don't think there were. I think that there were other people, and I think that they existed outside the Garden of Eden. I don't know why. I don't know how. God didn't feel the need to explain it. God didn't feel the need to talk about it. But obviously, Cain has some extensive knowledge that Adam and Eve just lack for whatever reason. And so that'll do it for today's exploring the Bible, exploring what's going on, the Bible explained, shall we say. Hopefully you guys will return next week. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments. I will attempt to answer. I would like to invite you to accept Jesus Christ in your heart. You can have peace today. You don't need every single answer, but the one answer that you should know is that hell is real, and when you die, your soul's going to go somewhere. So you may not want to serve God. You may think that, hey man, God's not that great. But I assure you, he's much better than the alternative, which is Satan. So hell is a separation from God. It is not a place to be punished. It is a place where Satan dwells, and Satan is definitely not going to give you anything. So accept Jesus Christ in your heart, accept that there is a God, and hopefully you will be saved and have peace in your life too. So I've been your host, Dr. Freedom. Really appreciate you guys tuning in, and hopefully you will come back next time for some more exploring the Bible and the Bible explained.